topics and as in-depth as we can. So we're going to just chop it up as best we can. Pete, if you want to go ahead and start us off, you can click your mic on and start sharing and, give us what you got. Introduce the topic, kind of just spitball from there, and we'll hit the ground running.
Yeah, thanks, Pat. Really appreciate it and excited to get going and talk a little bit. But something that's come up a lot over the quarantine for me, talking with, I'm sure some of the other guys have too, but talking with travel teams, high school coaches, other college coaches. One of the biggest things I kept getting asked was a throwing routine in season, what each day would look like in a 7-day plan, more specifically. So that's kind of what I wanted to touch on just briefly. So I'll just share my screen real quick. And then, Pat, I think I can upload this too, correct, to the ABCA website?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So what I came up with after a bunch of these different discussions and talking to different programs is kind of a 3-day cycle, and it's something similar that we use with Minnesota, and I've used actually prior in college as well. But it always helped me just organize the week in a better fashion, whether it was Saturday or Sunday, planning it out. Started with the mound days, and then in between, I would fill in those days just on conversations with other coaches and how they built up their pitchers, where we were in the season, that kind of thing. So came up with medium, heavy, and light days, and then they're just going to repeat based off your mound schedule. Get to an actual 7-day plan at the very bottom. Just briefly cover what each category would be. So medium, we're going to go through our normal plyo routine. Can also blend plyos off the mound. If you guys have portable mounds near your walls, or if you're throwing into chain link fences, I'm sure everyone's getting creative at some point with plyos, but big fan of blending it off the mound. Around 200 feet-ish would be a medium catch, so anything past that would be your max distance. And then it's also a good day to incorporate some skill and drill work, whether you wanted to do a touch and feel, maybe bring up a target close to the mound, but still get off the mound. Core velocity belt or any other, drill package that you guys use at your program would be a really good day to incorporate that, and another day to touch the mound, which would then roll into your heavy day. Heavy days, you're going through your full game day routine. Max distance long toss with pull downs coming in. Could mix in some drill work on this heavy day, but in terms of coverage, I always found it the most difficult when I'm trying to lock in on guys on pen day or game day. To be in multiple places at the same time was just really difficult. So I tried to break up the skill guys, a different time, and not have, if you're going, your heaviest day or your pen day, not to blend too many drills or anything additional that would pull my attention away from the most important thing, which is being focused at, being present at the bullpen and being with those guys when they're on the mound. And then the big thing that would be the next day, which is light. And I'm really big into guys moving their arms the next day, doing something. Easy catch. It could be 60 feet. It could be out to 90 feet. Treat it as a recovery day, but we want to move the arm as well. Something else that kept coming up was plyos. And I've actually had some guys in the past that have deferred more to plyos the day after. They pick a couple drills. And they just wanted to go through, a couple quick drills, 15 throws, and that was all they wanted to do that day in terms of moving their arm. And then I also wanted to touch just briefly on lifting and conditioning, because it always does come up. How do you plan it in? How do you mix it into your routine? It's program specific. Every school I've coached at, every level I've been at has been different. Some, when I started coaching in college, I was at a Division II school, and we did not have a strength coach, so we had to incorporate that and pull out a specific time from practice or early mornings. So I can't comfortably say you need to lift on these days, because it's all program specific and what resources you guys have at your individual places. But kind of in this outline is my goal would be, this is a rough draft and you guys butcher it and make it yours, but it's something on paper and something that I've used both at the college level and in professional baseball, I think is a really good place to start. So just going into the sample 7-day cycle, you'll see that medium, heavy, and light kick it off days 1, 2, and 3, and then you're repeating that. If you go down to mound work, you'll see the bullpen 2x15, and then game on day 5. So that's how you'd split up. That could be, again, program specific or even pitchers specific if they want to be 2 days out, day out, 3 days out if they don't recover that well. Again, you guys know your pitchers better than anybody. This is just a rough draft and kind of red marker, do what you want with it, play around with the days. But just something I thought that would be worth sharing after multiple conversations, like so many in this audience that are, in the youth level, which are doing an awesome job getting them ready for high school. High school coaches doing an awesome job getting them ready for college. And then, hopefully in pro ball too, where we're on a little bit different structure in terms of, mound routine and games and stuff like that. But a good foundation and a good place to start. Mixed in stretch bands, plyos. These are just recommendations, stuff that I've used in the past. As I mentioned before, big on touching the mound as often as we can. Obviously, it's always tough to, throw a bullpen every day and expect guys to recover well. But skill work or drill work off the mound, as I mentioned, plyos off the mound, blending that could be a really productive way to get some mound reps, get guys a little more comfortable on the slope, and get them ready for that big important game day too. So broke it up into different categories here. Hopefully it's digestible and a really good place for you guys to start. So that's all I really wanted to share today, and I'll stop the share right now. Thanks.
Yeah, actually, just leave that up if you could, Pete, because one of the things that when I was looking at this and we talked about, and you mentioned some guys just like using plyos the day after on a recovery day. In your time working with all levels of guys, and you've worked with plyos pretty much most of your time in college baseball, right?
Yep.
Did you ever find that guys either steered toward heavier weighted balls on a recovery day or lighter? Was it something that you found was just they only threw 30 pitches versus 100? Was there anything specific in terms of the weight that they used on the day after?
Start off with a 5-ounce and then kind of work from there. And I'm just big into conversation, and hopefully a lot of former pitchers of mine have kind of, maybe I just asked too many questions, or just ask for complete transparency and just a really good flow. How they're feeling and what they wanted. Some guys wanted to feel really, they wanted to feel like a Aroldis Chapman and throw the underweight and throw that a couple times. And hey, man, if that makes you tick, let's do it. But let's watch the volume, and that's where some of the give and take works in to play. But I'd start with a 5 and then kind of play around, and it's guy to guy specific. Right. And then in terms of volume, no different if they're going out to 60 feet and tossing it for 15 throws. If you want to pick 2 drills, split it in half in terms of 15 or 7 and 7, 8 and 8. I mean, you can fluctuate a little bit, but just try and give them some ownership and some freedom to pick and choose what they like to.
How popular are footballs for recovery at the minor league level?
We have them around. Actually, the youth footballs are a little more popular, and that also gets into a different thing with spin work and some different stuff too. But no, it's a good alternative, and maybe there's some other things that can get corrected too. Staying inside 90 a little bit, or some different things that guys are working on, and it breaks up the monotony of just ball, glove, partner, throw, and you can respectfully do some nice little slant routes that aren't too crazy, or stuff like that. But it's a good tool, and we got them out there, and we had them in college too, and I think it's a good alternative as well. So I could get into skill work. The buckets are kind of broad on the plan, but that could easily go in that bucket too.
For all you college pitching coaches out there, it's always beneficial to coach for a team that has a football team, because they get rid of footballs like MLB pitchers get rid of baseballs. So when I was at Fordham, they gave me about 6 right off the bat. And one thing that I noticed is And an NFL football weighs close to 13 to 15 ounces, which is almost a pound. And I said this in my speech earlier. There were guys that I coached that at Fordham, at wherever, Wash U, they have a start. They throw 60 plus pitches, and they would literally not pick up a baseball the next day. And I'm thinking, what are you doing? Like, you got to get the arm moving. You got to do something. And then we'd introduce a football into the mix, and the next thing you know, they're long tossing it. And I think the biggest thing was that the constraint of the football, like you said, staying inside 90, gave them that kind of confidence to work through that soreness, where they're using their body more. They're not, trying to force a baseball to a spot. They're just kind of having fun with it. They're being more athletic. And so that was something that I really thought was interesting when I started doing it. And now it's a staple of any program that I'm coaching, because I just think it could be so much value. Like you said, too, part of it can help with spin. It can work with, just a number of athletic options. But when you're doing in this schedule, are you picking and choosing days that you might do more sort of high effort pitch development stuff? So is that just on your heavy day and just on your quote unquote game day? Are you doing, are you letting guys get off the slope and throw off speed, or is it just fastballs?
No, in Penn's game, obviously full mix.
Right.
In terms of pitch design, saving that more for the bullpen. Some of the skill work might be something that helps translate into that pen, so it's really good to incorporate that in that medium day before, so you can work on it and then see if there's any transition into the next day's pen or week to week. Tracking it in college, it was all bullpens. We only had the one Rapsodo 1.0, the standing pain in the butt unit that would always fall over in the wind, but trying to filter guys through that. And then using an iPhone. We don't need to go into the resources that we have at the pro level, because it's not really applicable to a lot of people here, but the new iPhone is phenomenal. Using the slow motion camera, and that's kind of how we've been communicating with a lot of our guys over the summer, in the fall, and currently, and having us, video feedback and get that feedback loop going is through slow motion phone camera, quality. So it doesn't have to be anything as fancy. That stuff's nice and it's awesome. You can get a little bit more in the weeds later on, but I would pick and choose more along the lines of the bullpen and structuring it based off your staff, how many guys you have and how many you need to filter through. And some guys might be, maybe 2 or 3 that's a tech bullpen for them, and then the rest is a regular bullpen, just so you can give ample attention to those, select few, and then rotate them through the rest of the guys later in the week or the following week and stuff like that. So that's something I always juggled, especially the last few years of college, was about trying to be everywhere and realizing I couldn't. So how do I space it out and make it effective for everyone, and so I can cover as much as I can?
Yeah, I know. One of the things that I've always kind of thought was interesting is how pitchers, sometimes they'll be they're breaking stuff on flat ground, and it's great, it's electric, but then they get on the mound and they get disconnected. The movement's not the same, and it's like, well, how much time are you spending on the mound throwing it? Like, just because it's not a pen day doesn't mean you can't get on the mound for 5 pitches and spin some just to create that feel. One of the things that we did last year prior to us getting shut down was we had, and I totally just threw this up against the wall and asked some relievers if they wanted to try it in preseason when we were doing inter squads. And the guys that we knew weren't going to throw 4 to 5 innings, right, in relief, they're just 1 to 2 inning guys. Why don't you try getting on the mound before the outing and getting going like 95%, spin a couple, throw 6 to 10 pitches max, 6 to 10, and see how you feel and see if that impacts your performance at all or your recovery or everything. And we kind of mapped it out pretty strictly, and guys loved it. They just loved being on the mound. They never threw on flat ground after that. They only did that basically when they were kind of doing catch play. And I thought that was something that was really interesting. It's like, how many 4 o'clock hitters do we have where they're smashing balls in BP, but then once they get in the game, they can't hit anything on the outer half or an off-speed pitch. So getting pitchers more acclimated to the mound and giving them the freedom to say, hey, you can be on the mound more often than you are. It's just a matter of managing it. So I think that's good, but you got to start with a framework like this, and then you adapt. You can't just kind of willy-nilly go start throwing off the mound 6 days a week, and then 2 weeks into it, you're gassed. So having this structure, I think, is really, really huge, and I appreciate you putting this together for us. I know there's a lot of people out there that are struggling with how to manage arms, how to manage pitch counts, how to manage lifting. Some of these kids have more time than ever, and they always don't do the right thing with it. So,
and then it just could be a 1 week, 1 page quick hitter. This is your whether they're throwing a pen at a facility or at practice or bouncing between two different teams. Here's a week schedule. Share it within the couple teams. It could be easily just communication's the biggest thing, and I think that's some gaps that I've seen, especially in the college youth side. With guys playing on different teams and stuff like that. But if you map it out, a week in advance, and use this as a springboard or not, but wanted to share something to at least get something on paper for some guys.
And as we've all found out, and I'm sure many of the pitching coaches on this Hotstove have known, this could be week 1, week 2 could be drastically different based on recovery, based on rain, based on travel. So always be willing to adapt your schedule and do what's best for the player, and not just my organization. I think that's huge.
Or the random or the required NCAA mandated off day that always throws a little wrinkle in everything. So
for sure. Cool. So go ahead and Connor, we'll kind of hand it off to you and get right into it, my man.
Awesome. No, first and foremost, thank you. That was an awesome intro, Pat. Really appreciate it. And it is true. Pink was actually my first pitching coach ever back in the day. And quite honestly, if you guys don't know, if you need to learn a left-handed pickoff move, that is your guy. That is the best lefty pickoff move in the business. But really appreciate you guys. Thank you to the ABCA for having me. Want to give a shout out to Coach T, because I know you're watching, because you just texted me. Donnie, Bobby, please don't text me while we're doing this. I don't know what's going to come on the screen or anything, right? But I wanted to take the opportunity. Look, I think it's been out there. You've maybe seen it, and I'm kind of here to just touch on it from my point of view. But my brother and I started a company called Clean Fuego, and it's essentially a Swiss Army knife for baseball players. I think we've been tagged as a pitching tool, but I want to make sure that everyone's aware and knows how important this can be for even position players. And so kind of the way it started was there was this thing floating around baseball 4 or 5 years ago, especially when I entered the pro world, and it was called spin efficiency. And you had a number of tech things that were out there, tech balls, Rapsodos, Trackmans, all this sort of thing. They all seem to have kind of their own definition of it, their own algorithm of it. And really, we just didn't know too much about it at the time. And then if you think about it, some of this stuff gets incredibly complicated. It was, how can we come up with something that's not only easy to recognize, it's a very easy visual, but it's not a gimmick. Like, that was the number one rule my brother and I had when we first started this thing. Look, if it doesn't work and it's a gimmick and it's not being successful with players, we're not going to put it out there. Like, our goal is to further the game in any capacity that we can. And I love it when we get, the messages of guys throwing hockey pucks. That's what we used to do at the Dodgers. It was a spin station. Donnie Alexander, it was amazing. Introduced me to it, hockey pucks. And that's kind of what sparked this whole idea. If you guys are throwing hockey pucks and doing spin feel, that's great. We just want you to get better. However you can get better, do it. And what's amazing about it is we wanted to figure out a way to provide you immediate feedback and give you consistent feel. Okay. So in other words, the explanation of spin efficiency, and I'll talk about it more in the sense of four-seamers. And you guys have probably seen four-seam ride guys, or you see the clip of Joey Gallo in the dugout doing this. Like, what was that, right? I think we've all been at those games where the pitcher's throwing 87 miles an hour and just sending everyone back to the dugout. They just have no chance. They're not even close to the pitch. And then a guy throwing 92, everyone's teeing off on it. Well, we can kind of explain what's happening now. And so if you want to think about it this way, let's say Pink and I were playing catch with a football. Great transition. We just talked about footballs, right? If I throw Pink a perfect spiral, okay, the orientation of that throw on a football, it's a gyro spin. It's a bullet spin, right? So I could be at 1,500 RPMs, 2,000 RPMs, 4,000 RPMs. Honestly, the spin, because of that orientation, doesn't really matter. If anything, that gyro bullet spin is going to help keep that ball on a straight line, right? And it has that natural kind of football path to your throwing partner, okay? Now, let's take that football, turn it sideways, picture Stewie from Family Guy, and you're literally backspinning the thing, and I'm throwing it to Pink now, right? That would be considered 100% spin efficiency, because now that backspin is fighting gravity through the air. And what we've seen, what we've learned a lot with some of the plyo balls and some of the weighted ball efforts, they're amazing. They can juice up your velocity, but sometimes guys struggle to maintain good fastball characteristics, right? Just learning how to backspin the baseball properly, okay? And the ball, what it is essentially looks like a hockey puck. This is the representation of our 8-ounce ball. Because some guys like to warm up with weighted balls. We wanted you to be able to get that into your throwing program as you're going through your progression, right? But also to make sure that you're not cutting or coming around the ball. I think a lot of people, you guys may know, if you've done a weighted ball program or anything, or you touch a heavy ball while playing catch and you're moving backwards, those first couple throws after you get rid of it, oftentimes it might have that kind of dead-end air to it. It doesn't cut through to your partner. Your partner may even say, hey man, you're cutting it like crazy, right? So the idea behind that was to give you immediate visual representation of what's going on with your throw, right? If I'm throwing to Pink here, here's the fuego. I'm practicing a 4-seam throw, all right? If you guys can see on here, we have it. This is 3D printed. 42 different prototypes. We wanted to make sure the thing actually benefited you. And the reason that, if you can, the reason I would prefer you guys to try this over a hockey puck or over, let's say you put tape around a ball, is because this has the proper weight and the centralized mass. It's really, really important. If you think about it, if you just put tape around a baseball, that's great. And if that works for you, please keep doing it. But is it actually making you better? What's the impact of it? What's any different from you just throwing a regular baseball? Yeah, you might be able to pick up and see it, but is there any sort of adjustment that's being made for the feel of your throw? Right? Now, if you think about this, we take away basically the outer thirds of the ball. And when you throw this thing, you're going to know right away what's going on. And it's really fun to see guys, because a lot of people think they're backspinning a baseball, but it really opens their eyes to, oh my goodness, I'm not even close to backspinning a baseball. This makes sense. Maybe why everyone's teeing off on it. When you throw this thing, if I'm throwing it to Pink and I got the Kershaw slot, I'm way over the top here, right? You want to see this fly to your partner just like that, okay? What typically happens is two things will happen. You either will throw it and it will wobble, okay? Or, Peter, right? Or I had to get one smirk out of Pete on this thing. Okay, all right? So if you get it to wobble, or if it ends up wobbling, that means one thing. If you end up throwing it, it can often cut. Here, I'll go righty. I apologize. Or actually, no, this works. So if I throw it to him, right, and you see that side of the ball, what ends up happening is guys end up somewhat cutting the ball, right? And now you can think about the point of the football. This is that inefficiency I'm talking about. So what we say is, when you throw this thing, make it easy to catch for your partner. Don't, simplify the process down. If it's cutting on you like crazy, but the spin is clean, that's a throw issue. You're not behind the ball or anything. If you're wobbling the throws to your partner, okay, what we recommend is that's most likely a finger pressure issue. All right? And what I love about this, and what I love trying to talk with college, high school coaches, is look, everyone's looking online. Everyone sees the Rapsodo data. Everyone sees the TrackMan data, the Diamond Connects, or whatever it may be. But it's, how do you read it? How do you make it better? Okay, that's great. I'm at 85% efficiency, but what do I do next? How do I actually improve the thing? And so that's what we were trying to attack. All right. And one thing, I want to give a shout out to my man, Mr. J-Van, Alan Yeager. Awesome long toss program. I'm sure you guys have seen it and everything. I love how he describes it. one thing that I've used and talked about with some of my guys, and this may be a little out there, all right, but hang with me. I promise this will make sense. But if you look at all of your pitchers, throwers, anyone, when they grab a four-seam grip, and it'd be awesome, Pink, Pete, Jono, if you would just nod, if you can say yes or no, is do all of your pitchers have the same four-seam grip? Yes or no? No shot. It's all over the place, right? Where are you? Are you on your fingertips? Are you in the crease? Is the thumb here? Are you have a thumbprint on the ball? Are you cocked thumb? Are you fingertips? Which C are you on? It's crazy. And if you're consistently throwing and you're trying to see these things, it gets complicated. But imagine just a few throws with this. You can try out everything I just went through. Thumb position, in the crease, fingertips, anything. It'll tell you right away what's going on, and you may discover something you didn't even know about. Our whole thing is just use it to your advantage in any way possible. I bring up Alan because during the extension phase of this program, essentially as you're moving back, believe it or not, I actually challenge a lot of our guys to throw two-seamers. Because the one thing is I can almost guarantee if I ask a guy to grab a two-seamer, you're getting one of two things. You're either getting this where you're parallel with the seams, or you're getting what? The crosshair, right? And then you got some guys one seam, whatever. But this is the one grip on the ball, guys, that actually guarantees me the middle of the baseball. And it was actually what we went with for the width of our ball, if you check that out. All right? So as you're going through your extension phase, if we practice getting the middle of the baseball, once we reach our max distance, however you're doing it within your throwing program, check out Peter's thing that he just dropped. As you're coming back in, flip then back to the four seam when you're bringing that ball down on a line and whatnot. What's crazy about this, why everyone, I get the big eye roll if you bring this up, and I get it, I'm with you. Even when I talked about this originally, this is kind of crazy. But if I'm long tossing and I need to get out there, okay, where do I have to start that throw on a two-seamer? We know it's going to run. Where do I have to start that throw? It's going to be a little over here. I'm going to be a little more out in front of it, lengthening all of these muscles in a good way, that all of a sudden you're going to see some pretty cool things happen to your throw. It could unlock some serious potential. It might not work for everyone, but it's something to really consider when you're playing catch. Even position players. This is something that I've seen, and we've had success with some of our position players at the professional level, is using that. Because oftentimes you're just grabbing the ball, turning to, whatever, maybe you're just grabbing and throwing. However, when they're playing catch, to get them to feel the middle of the ball can really enhance their game. I could go into anything else, but I think that's kind of a good baseline for it. Pink, do you have any questions?
Yeah, one of the things that because we have guys that use this, and I think one of the things that really is a question / issue that we're having with certain guys, certain arm slots, is when the ball has a tendency to be really clean, but then it cuts a little bit or it runs, is that a byproduct of so for instance, you're not getting wobble, but you're getting a little bit of cut action? Is that a byproduct of just the ball itself, or is that a byproduct of slot, tilt, mechanical? Are they on the mound, like things like that?
Yeah, it could literally be everything. We wanted, the goal of producing this ball is we didn't want it to be easy. I think a lot of guys run away from it because they might throw it first and this is ridiculous. I'm throwing sliders here. What's going on? But there's something cool in that. And I agree. Yeah, you're going to have all sorts of different, especially if you try a short distance curveball or whatever, that thing could back up a little. Just that's the design of the ball for the aerodynamics with the centralized weight, right? You're going to see some different things, but that is potentially the minuscule discrepancy between that extra 2 inches of movement or whatever it may be. You probably have seen college coaches, if you have Rapsodos or anything like that, you might have guys popping 100% efficiency on there, but the movements are very different. There might be a little more in there to expose, and that's what this ball does. The one thing I would challenge you on is when your players are using this, I love it when they blend. And what I mean by when you blend it is grab it. You may have seen Gonsolin warming up during the postseason with it. It's one of his favorite things to do. Second smirk out of Pete. And he will basically warm up with the red. This is our regular. This is the same exact weight of a baseball. okay, when you hold it in your hand, it's actually going to feel a little lighter, to be honest with you. But if you put it on a scale, I promise you it's the same weight. By using these, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Payne, can you bring me back?
Yeah, you were just talking about more blending.
Thank you. So when you're blending this, so he would start with the overload, okay, a few throws. He then goes to the regular weight, right? And then he alternates, okay? So it's the fuego, back to the baseball, fuego, back to the baseball. If you can start to train your fingers to find the middle of the ball on a four-seamer, you're going to be in a really, really good spot. So I would recommend blending it for any of those guys that are having some weirdness come out or anything that might be different. At the end of the day, the goal is to throw the baseball better, not the clean fuego better.
Right. And I think one of the things that, obviously baseball has a tendency to lend itself to gimmicks, to products that are helpful, to training aids. Guys have probably thrown away more things that they've used that haven't worked or they're tired of using. When you talk about this, you say it's all about throwing the baseball better. What is the outcome of throwing the baseball better? Like, what is the overall in-game achievement of cleaning up spin efficiency, of trying to – I can't tell you, Connor, how many guys I see now that throw that, like, 87-mile-an-hour cutter. And it's not a cutter, but it's not a really good fastball.
No, and that's the thing is play around with this and try. Maybe a different horseshoe's better. Maybe hooking the crease of the seam is better. Maybe you're more of a fingertips guy. I've even seen guys on the second digit, the second crease, being able to throw it better. I'd even strongly recommend figuring out what's going on with the thumb. Are you cocking it? Are you on the side? By even just doing this, I don't have the biggest hands in the world, but when you can cock, you can feel that extra pressure that's being applied to your fingertips to allow you to stay loose, but it creates that last little whip there on the throw, which could also maybe provide a little more of that index finger to get you going. There's great information that's out there. And in one session, you could probably tell a kid to really overpronate and juice up their numbers in that one session. Yes, that can be done. But the goal is to slow drip this into the throw, because we don't want to have any long-term effects from anyone that's over-exaggerating any adjustment to make the throw better. When they're playing catch with the thing, just make it easy for your partner to catch. Look at the target. Probably like one of the first things you'll see is when they grab it, they get really excited to see what the spin looks like. So they'll kind of peek over at the ball out of air, and there you go, Joe Kelly through the window, right? And it happens. It's okay. So when you just really bring them in and just, hey, pick me up, whatever you're working on, just play catch with me. Play catch with me, and you're going to see some really cool results as it slow drips into that throw. We don't want to do huge, massive overcorrections. So anything that we can do that helps us out long term, and then we can maintain.
And then when you talk about transitioning that into in-game results, what are you trying to achieve with better spin efficiency? Because I know there's probably a lot of people on this call that can look at a Rapsodo or a TrackMan report and say, yep, that's good. And then there's other guys that are like, oh, man, look at that 2,200 spin. Wow. And they don't know what they're doing. So, as briefly as you can, kind of say, when you have that fastball that's 85% efficient versus that fastball that's 100% efficient, what's the outcome in game that you're looking for?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I'll tread softly down this path. But it's in one of the senses, if you look at induced vertical break, I think that's out there. Everyone's been talking about it. Baseball Savant's been putting out some really awesome information. And my goodness, please figure out the toggle so we could get the pitcher's perspective. I don't know if anyone can reach out there. But the idea here is, can we get the vertical break as high as possible or as low as possible? And I think that's the easiest way to think about it. The horizontal stuff, okay, more run, D-May style, great. Less run, Scotty A, it's going straight down, okay? But really just thinking more of vertical is how can we get it to really take off, or how can we get Blake Trinan to really make the thing sink? And what's cool about this, and what's cool about even with Clean Fuego, is it will actually kind of tell you, if you know what you're looking for, which way to take the guy, right? So if you can get a sense of how they're throwing it, maybe if they're really cutting the ball, well, maybe we need to figure out we might want to go a different route, right? Maybe there's something that could bleed in later on down the road, right? I'll kind of walk a fine line there. But that's kind of what you're looking for, okay? At the major league level, average vertical breaks around 15, 16 inches, something like that. And you're going to see guys that are accustomed to hitting certain areas and certain fastballs, especially at some of these at college level, high school and whatnot. So if we can avoid the BP throw that everyone's used to, like the movement profile of that, that's what makes it special.
Yeah. Excellent.
And I will say off of this, and please cut me off, Pat, I appreciate it.
No, we're good, man.
There are all sorts of other ways with off-speed pitches that you can utilize this.
That was going to be my last thing to touch on. Somebody asked in the chat.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it's great. And it gets complicated. This stuff gets incredibly complicated, right? I think we've all started to recognize watching games that, okay, sliders are now curveballs are now sliders, now we have slurs. What's the cutter slutter thing? Like, I almost like to describe it as what's the efficiency of your pitch, right? So in other words, if you were to chop off Andrew Miller's arm, but a picture of him with his slider grip, I bet and we just held it straight up, a lot of people would think he's throwing a curveball.
Yeah.
Right? He's essentially throwing a curveball from that lower slot. So when you're practicing curveballs with Fuego, the idea here is we want efficient front spin now, right? So we wanted efficient backspin. Now we're looking for efficient front spin. So you can even, if you have a partner, I really recommend close distance. I've seen a lot of videos of guys trying to huck this thing 70 feet. It's not really designed for that. It's more of a close distance spin feel. And when you throw this thing on forward spin, you'll see it right away. Okay, typically curveballs aren't as efficient as fastballs, so don't be, killing yourself trying to make this thing perfect. But it helps provide some really cool feel, and it gives you that immediate feedback. Now, I'll go to changeups next, and we've been tagged, and it's been fantastic. Big shout out to Devin Williams. He had an unbelievable season. The Brewers are doing a phenomenal job, giving us shout outs and tags and all that. But they've, it's called the airbender and rolling it, right? So kind of a general rule of thumb. There's so many different ways to throw changeups. I'm only going to describe one way right now, all right? And it's essentially, if we can kill the spin, lower the direction, some cool things can happen, right? So in other words, now when I'm throwing a fastball, when we go to work on our changeup, ideally, if we can get to that UFO spin, that would be ideal. So you see Devin or these other guys, when they throw it, they're really exaggerating. And it's how close can you get to that side spin, that UFO spin. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be pretty, but I challenge you to blend it with a baseball, and you could see some really, really cool results, right? And then the last thing, and then stop me, Pink, is with sliders. And the reason I talked about this before is kind of relates to efficiency. And these things get complicated. You see your kid is popping a 930 spin direction on a Rapsodo, and it's like, is that good? Is that bad? We don't even know what this is, right? Or maybe we want some backspin on that slider because it might hold the line longer. I don't know. These are things to kind of figure out. But for example, let's say we have a kid and he's coming in at a 930 spin direction, okay, at a variety of different efficiencies. But how do we get there, okay? And if Bueller sees this, he's going to punch me through the screen. So if he sees me do this with thumbs anymore, I'm going to feel it. But the way to get there is imagine there's a little thumbtack on top of this ball, okay? That thumbtack is going to represent my spin efficiency, all right? So in other words, spin direction. Spin direction is essentially what's the direction on the front of the baseball? What direction is it spinning? So we put a clock here, and imagine you guys are standing behind me, all right? We put a clock here. If I backspin this, okay, perfect backspin right here, that's straight up at 12 o'clock, okay? Does that make sense? Cool. Front spin, 6 o'clock. Now, how do we get to that 9:30 slider? Well, if I take this top part and I drop it all the way down to 9:30, okay, and then sliders, we want them to actually be inefficient, right? So this is me essentially reverse engineering a grip for you, is now we're at 9:30. Now we want it inefficient. So I'm going to change the efficiency with my thumbs. I drop it, and then however efficient or inefficient I want it, I've now recreated a slider grip with clean flake. Okay. Now I can work on driving this, turning my wrist, whatever it may be, ripping down off on the side, creating that bullet. Play with it. You can even do cutters at a slight tilt. But I challenge you guys to have fun with this. It's limitless. It's a cool little Army Swiss knife, and no, appreciate it. Hope you guys have fun with it.
Awesome, Connor. Thank you. Jono,
Yo,
step on up to the plate, my man. Give us what you got.
let's do it. Let's see if we can get the screen shared properly here. How we looking? Good?
Oh, yeah.
Slide this finger out of the way, and then we will go. Just kind of talking a little bit about deliveries. I know it's a massive topic, and wow, how the times have changed in general. I mean, you think back to how we thought about deliveries 10 years ago, even honestly 5 years ago, and just the amount and the ways that things have changed, from individual philosophies to sort of holistically the way that everybody thinks about them differently and sort of views them differently. It used to always be cookie cutter. It used to always be balance point. Connor's buddy Mark Pryor as the example sort of to that point. With all the great work that Tom House has done and everything, I think that's always, he gets a bad rap because of certain things such as that really became sort of cookie cutter mechanics in that sense. And now we've graduated with that. And now we're talking so much more about efficiency and how a guy's moving. And realistically, like, I just kind of wanted to put together a little bit of something, somewhat of a process for helping people to look at deliveries and ultimately to discern, what am I looking at? What do I need to look at? And realistically, just how can I better understand it? I don't want to go too in depth because you guys know how it is. We could talk about deliveries for 36 hours as opposed to the hour or two that we're going to be chatting here. But just sort of starting with the what, right? Like what is the delivery in its own sense? Like, what does it look like? There's so many tools. We talked about, just general iPhone cameras and the sophistication of those, the video cameras there nowadays. And what are the performance and health parameters that I'm looking at? And what I mean by that is realistically, like when we're looking at the delivery, just like what we were saying before, we're not looking at it from an aesthetics point of view. We need to look at the delivery from a performance and a health point of view. Is the athlete getting everybody out? Is he able to stay healthy and recover and continue to track along his development line, right? Or is something within the delivery potentially holding that back? I think a lot of times, we're wired and ingrained to be so results oriented that, we're gonna think, oh man, that delivery doesn't look right, and then a guy gets hurt, and we're gonna instantly blame the delivery. There's probably a lot deeper to go than that, or say, oh, this guy stinks right now. There's something wrong with his delivery. I think we jump to that very quickly sometimes, but then diving into, okay, let's say that for sure, like, you know what, I've thought about it. I'm looking at it. I've weighed pros, cons, etc. Now within that actual delivery that I'm looking at, where and when is the actual problem? And I think this is where we can fall into traps too, insofar as like we look at the symptom as opposed to trying to look at the disease. And there's a lot of pitching coaches talk about this. This is not groundbreaking by any sense of the imagination, but I want to go, sometimes I have to go further upstream in order to figure out what exactly is going on in that delivery, that maybe there's something happening, say, with a spin efficiency problem. That as Connor talked about, that doesn't always necessarily just mean something that's going on at release. It could be backed up just a tick, depending on who it is. And then kind of getting into the why, like why do they move that way? And I'm going to spend a little bit more time on that in 1 second, because I think it's really important. And then finally, the actual action. I always find it fascinating, like talking to coaches and doing things such as this, because it sort of shows all of the different layers that you have to peel back that go into being a coach. That go into, you think about the person, you think about the player, you think about him physically, you think about him emotionally, you think about him mentally. and then at the same time you have this sort of career roadmap of sorts that you're seeing who that guy is now. You also see who he could be. He's a freshman right now. Like, who is he going to be as a junior, as a senior? And how can I help him even push beyond that ceiling potentially? But I kind of like to take it back a little bit more and spend a little bit of time on the why. Just insofar as, I don't have a lot of drills that I'm going to share or anything. I mean, there's such wealth of information that's out there, and I'm not even going to get into specific delivery diagnoses, but more so on the why, because I think that this is a part that really gets passed over a ton. As far as, okay, we see what it actually is, we see what the delivery is, we can look at it on video, we can look at it on high frame rate video, etc. But like, what is actually the root cause potentially of why he might move that way? And to that point, I almost think of it as like gauges. And in this example, I'm going to talk about a little bit about external rotation and internal rotation. I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole because we could talk for days on this again, but just sort of understanding that everybody is built, structured different, and trains differently too. And then that ultimately affects, combination of kind of body structure, composition, strengths, weaknesses, etc. But you think of each guy in the sense of having a gauge for their structure. You almost think about who are your tight movers and who are your loose movers. To that point, sort of talking about the hips specifically. This is almost the easiest visual representation, which is why I'm going to go through kind of the hips and how it ends up affecting lower half within deliveries. But all you really need to know, like, external rotation is a guy who likes to be open. Internal rotation is a guy who likes to be closed. Think about your friends that walk around like myself that are duck-footed. Like, those are guys that prefer external rotation. They sit with their legs open when they sit down. They walk and their toes are a little bit open, versus pitchers that their gauge for internal rotation would be higher, or kind of pigeon-toed, and might walk around like that. So I'm going to show a video real quick just to kind of show the differences, because there's not just one loading strategy. There's not just one unloading strategy. There's much more that goes into that. And this goes into getting away from the cookie cutter mold of how we view pitchers and how we view deliveries. Is that if I ask, the guy on the table that prefers external rotation to load and unload the exact same way that I'm going to ask the guy that on the table prefers internal rotation, if I ask them to do the exact same things, one or potentially both of them is going to end up getting jacked up, because I'm asking them to do something that goes against their own physical structure. And this is something that that's in line very much so, TPI, On Base U, the Florida Baseball Ranch. This has been talked about a lot, and I think it even deserves a little bit of a deeper dive. So, sort of showcasing a video here, the pitcher on the left is a pitcher that very much prefers that external rotation, prefers to be open a little bit more. His structure set up that way through movement screens, through general range of motion measurements. We can find that out. And the pitcher on the right very much so prefers internal rotation. He actually legitimately kind of walks around pigeon-toed. And within that, I would challenge and urge all the pitching coaches and all the performance coaches on this call to get with your strength and conditioning coach, to get with your athletic trainer, maybe just to better understand this, and at the same time to understand like what your players are doing, because you might be asking your player to do something that you can't physically do, or he just doesn't operate through strength and power through that type of a position. So you see the guy that prefers the external rotation. You see his knees sort of stay out, almost more so towards third base or second base, I guess you could say, as opposed to the internal rotator kicks that knee in a little bit earlier. He can still load through that position, as opposed to if I were to flip this, they would both be very inefficient in terms of how their own individual structure lies. I'll touch on the lead leg because I think this is actually a little bit easier to visually see and visually represent. So now they're flipped. Now the guy on the left is the internal rotator. Guy on the right is the external rotator. And I think this also goes back to how we always used to think that everybody has to step in a straight line towards home plate and that's ultimately the most efficient way to go. And everybody needs to have their foot pointed straight forward. So I need to be directly in line and my foot needs to land facing straight forward. Well, ultimately, like these are both, I'm not going to say numbers or names or anything, but these are two guys that throw hard. I'm just going to say that. And they throw very differently and they load very differently and their forces are still very firm and they're still relatively efficient. So within that, again, just kind of providing that little bit of a visual representation, of a visual example of, how guys achieve positive results, positive outcomes through vastly different sort of movement patterns. And as I've kind of gone to study this, the biggest thing that I've realized is that guys don't shape their bodies to the delivery. The delivery ends up being shaped because of what the body does. And you see so many similarities there, but let me unshare and I'll.
Yeah, John, I think that's a great point. One of the things that I've been doing recently is teaching lessons to younger kids. And when you have the perspective of going from working with a potential draft pick as a junior or senior to now a 10-year-old that has a hard time standing on one leg with their foot 2 inches off the ground, or they can't raise their hand above their head and you're asking them to get into, a really good scapular position or step straight or whatever. It really does clarify kind of the limitations of the body. And this kid is not throwing this way because somebody taught him that. He's throwing this way because his body is shaping it. And he may not be able to correct the mechanical movement until he corrects the physical limitation or the, once you find the constraint that he has or the bias that his body is putting on him. I think it's really easy to see that with younger kids. And sometimes, we kind of gloss over as a college coach or a high school coach or travel ball coach or a professional coach. And you kind of lose sight of that minutia at times because you're looking at the ball flight. You're looking at, man, his breaking ball's not that good. Like, he's just not getting on top of it. Well, maybe, his body is changing and his movement is limited because of a change in his body. He used to be an external rotation guy. Now he's doing an internal rotation movement. We're not noticing it. So I think that's huge. I think the biggest part for me in sort of my journey as a pitching coach is understanding that aspect and just kind of keep coming back to it. One of the things I think that we can all agree on is development is not a linear cycle. It's a vicious tornado at times. And sometimes you get going in a straight line. It's hard to stop and kind of bang a left and return to the genesis of like what's gotten you to the point where this guy's doing really well. So I think that was really good. That was really helpful. And I know it's just a snippet because you could, like you said, you could really diagram any number of major leaguers, any number of high school deliveries with the lower half, and you could find something really different. And actually, I was talking to a kid that I was working with, and, he kept on wanting to get into this really aggressive front hip kind of, point the butt cheek to the plate movement. And because of that, he was completely losing the ability to, hold the ground on his back leg and just really get down the mound efficiently because he was forcing his body. He's not an internal rotator. He's not a guy that can really turn in. And so I actually started thinking about it, and I haven't thought about this guy in years. But I was just like, this, and so I pulled up a couple clips, and I thought, these are some guys, this kid wasn't trying to be this guy. But Kevin Brown, was as filthy as it comes. And one of the things that I showed the kid the video clip, and I'm like, what do you see? And he's like, oh yeah, he's loading his front hip. And I was like, well, yeah, he is. But then, as you watch, he kind of gets back to center before he really starts moving anything forward.
Sure.
And this kid was like cocking his front hip and like trying to go down the mound with that hip cocked and that knee turned in. And it was just so efficient. And then, I thought of this guy too. I was like, man, I haven't seen this guy pitch in years. But they have these movements that they feel comfortable with. But then once they kind of clear that back knee, now they're in sort of a what we would call a traditional delivery.
Sure.
And if you can't get your body in that position and then get out of it and then get into sort of your movement, I didn't realize how similar all these guys were, where they were just able to absolutely coil themselves, stay balanced, rotate, and then just get launched down the mound in a really efficient manner. I thought it was really fitting that before you had shown me your slides, I had this conversation with this kid, and I was like, man, this is going to be, this is clarifying some stuff for me too. So
it's kind of like I think I put that as under the how is like, okay, well, how can we help it?
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, it might be kind of coaching him out of a habit that he's gotten himself into. And I think ultimately coaches all have the best of intention, 100%. But sometimes there might be a bad cue, or there might be a bad, loading strategy that you try to give. And ultimately it's actually going against whatever that kid's body wants to do. So you might sit there and bang your head against the wall, or the kid might be athletic enough to kind of compensate and figure out how to make that adjustment that you're asking him to do, but it's not actually sort of ideal for him. So that's like one way that I just personally kind of view, whether it's drill work or cueing or talking about something to do with the delivery is like, okay, how can I help, but how can I at least not hurt? Like, I don't want to go against whatever it is that it should be the true end goal and what his body most naturally, most athletically, most explosively, most efficiently wants to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's great. Connor, real quick. So thank you, Jonna. That was awesome. I really appreciate it. What we're going to do now is just kind of glide back and forth on topics. I'll ask kind of questions based on some of the poll questions, some of the questions that I had prepared, and just kind of cross chat here. But Connor, have there been specific things on the mechanical side that you have seen that have possibly affected spin or spin efficiency in a positive or negative way?
Without a doubt. And what you can actually do is you can get really creative on eliminating certain body parts to maybe identify the culprit, right? And exactly what Jono just mentioned before, it may not be something going on back here. It could be something going on right at the setup position. Like, let's at least get the set position consistent and strong. So it's always good to go back and kind of see and check what it might be. I won't go into too much on like which mechanicals could enhance spin efficiency or anything like that. But there are certain common characteristics of it. I'll say like decel patterns can oftentimes have a good implication for how the ball's coming off. But if it's possible, Pat, I kind of want to pivot this and ask Jono a question to a degree.
Yeah.
When you're looking at mechanics and the mechanics, especially the lower half, how do you weigh the option of helping or just leaving it totally alone? Like, is there a threshold for you? Is it purely results based? Like, is there anything that you can touch on as far as like red flags? Okay, I got to jump in and help this kid now. Or I know that's a red flag, but he's punching out everyone. How do you balance that of like when to actually coach? And oftentimes it's best if you just leave them alone, right? Like,
you're really going to blow me up with like the most difficult question that we have.
Yeah, you're right. I am. Come on.
That to me. Sounds good. I appreciate that, man. I'll be sure to find something that I can ask you. I'll throw that right back at you. Well, like first thing, I'm really spoiled, and I think we all are at this point, just by means and kind of what we have, biomechanical reports, etc. Like, I mean, that's the sort of the cheat code as far as, okay, I can see efficiency and I can see whether this guy's efficient or not. I can look at in the past as far as, how does this guy recover? What is being asked of him from a pitching standpoint? I try as hard as I can personally not to assign performance, probably aside from velocity, just inherently by creating power and force to the ground and putting force out of the ball. But I try not to assign like, oh, this guy's mowing everybody down. It's his delivery is perfect. Like I think there's way too much that goes into it, exactly as you've sort of alluded to. But man, that's the tricky question. How do I and when do I decide how to dive in? And there's no answer. I just personally don't think that there is an answer, and I hope that there's at some point that maybe we come to that. But it's going to be individual for each guy, which is such a cop-out answer, to be perfect.
Yeah, it's not though. It's not a cop-out answer at all, and it's honestly like. Go ahead, Pink.
I think, and Jono and I kind of talked about this earlier today when we hopped on a phone call. At times we get so used to what we're doing being successful that we see something that is not necessarily in line with that, and we immediately think red flag. And that's ultimately the biggest issue with us as coaches is our biases have a tendency to shape that. So like what you're saying, Connor, is like, man, this kid has a really clean delivery. So I got a kid who's, striding wide open, the front knee bows, but he can plant and stick and execute glove side, arm side. Is that going to affect him in a negative way? Or, man, I got this kid who had a really high elbow climb. He pitched healthy for me for 3 years. But then a kid who's 6'4", 160 pounds comes in, has no foundation of strength, was abused as a high school pitcher, and comes in, and maybe that's not the right thing for him. Maybe we need to change it. So to me, it always, the hardest thing for me is to say, man, I've worked with kids that look like that, and they've been good.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to change him, but maybe it's not the best thing for him.
Right.
So the more I get into the details of mobility screens, biomechanics, the more I realize that nothing that I've ever done before has ever been right. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's been wrong. Like,
right.
It's been what I've been trying to do, the best job I can do for that athlete and get him to success. And that's one of the things I talked to, like Eugene and Willie Marshall and those guys. Those are great.
Yeah.
And they really kind of made that real clear for me, is that I think it's one of those things where as long as we continue to view it through the lens of success, the athlete, and then ultimately, how do we achieve greater levels of that, then yeah, we can probably find a clear path. But if you're just saying like, well, this is the way that really good pitchers throw, then it's never going to work. You're always going to be banging your head against the wall with a third of your staff.
Yeah,
I think that I'm kind of stealing from Ron Wolford at the Texas Baseball Ranch, but Connor, I'll ask you a question, and here you go. Now, kind of.
All right.
I know this isn't technically who we're talking about, but it's always been a good example that I've heard is, let's say you had Pedro Martinez.
Sure.
What would you do with his delivery?
Whew. Can we call Bobby Cuellar real quick? He's with the Dodgers. I think that's the man to speak to with that. This is what I'll say, and this is what I'll, with my question in regards to that too. I think it's also important just to ask the guy, hey, where do you get sore? Are you in pain? I think oftentimes when pitchers are very successful, it can hide the pain, let's be honest. And then it's a bad outing, and man, that pain is really, really amplified, right? So just getting a sense of generally where your guys get sore can kind of lead you down the road of like, oh my goodness, maybe it's time. Like maybe it's time we got to figure something out. If it looks bad to the eye, if it doesn't pass the eye test, but he's highly successful, no injury history, and he's not getting pain, that's kind of like okay, do your thing. Like, let's roll, especially for the level that we're at, the professional level. Like, these guys have had some serious foundation before they came to us. The last thing you want to do is ruin their identity, right? Pedro Martinez, obviously it's unbelievable. I love him. I think Pedro does some really cool things actually with his front leg that no one talks about. I think he has an unbelievable ability to remain and stay athletic. And he does you already mentioned Eugene and Willie and those guys. You want to talk about, I know they speak on upper half, planes of rotation and everything. This guy's body alignment was unbelievable, right? And for me with Pedro, it'd be the same kind of conversation of, hey, are you getting sore? Where are you in pain? What is it? Then it's an open communication between myself, the strength coach, the medical team. They might be seeing something. You want to be proactive with it. Fortunately for us, we have all this tech. We can start to see trends or things that can happen, and we want to jump it before it becomes an issue. We might have conversations. Mark and I might have conversations behind closed doors about a pitcher, and we might sit on something for a while, right? Because it's just not the right timing to bring it up with that individual, okay? Or we don't want to be flooding them with too much. The conversations could be simply as nothing related to baseball, but just helping the kid clear his head or the guy clear his head and whatnot. But what's unique about it, what I think Pedro does really well, and I think we're starting to see it come back into deliveries now, is that rotational aspect. I think we all kind of came up under wanting to execute that triple extension. You guys remember that? And I've always said, and I joked about it with Pink, that Lincecum screwed all of us by getting the 7.5 feet extension, and that's a realistic goal to achieve. And it's well, how do I get there? I'm going to jump. Well, when that happens, now we can't rotate. So what I like to say is there's a certain linear component of direction involved with the delivery, but we have to rotate. We have to learn how to use the ground, use our hips, right? Brought up core velocity belt, and be able to transfer that energy up the chain. But that's kind of like a halfway cop-out answer for you, John. I don't know. There you go.
You hit it. So that's you gave the best answer that I think you can give to that question. Okay, is he performing? Is he healthy? You're recovering good? You're gonna pat Pedro on the butt. And you're gonna say, "Go ahead, run along, young fella. Go ahead,
go do your thing. Go do your thing." Yeah, and I challenge you guys, especially during if you guys have stretching circles, you're a college environment, high school environment, whatever. Those are great opportunities to have those kind of one-off conversations. Hey, how you feeling? Hey, what's going on? I'm noticing you're kind of going lazy on the high legs or anything like that. Your hammy okay? Everything cool? And you just have that open line of communication, touch base with them, and that's when you can kind of gain some serious ground. Because if you're going to develop that trust, all of a sudden you're going to start to get more information from that player. And as long as they're there to know and understand you're there to help them get better, right? I didn't wake up and it's how can I ruin Jono's day, right? Once you get past that part of the relationship, really cool things can happen.
Pete, with your duty as a former rehab coordinator, you were obviously dealing with guys that were injured, either surgically or not, I assume, right? There were just guys doing rehabs because they had dead arm or, inflammation.
Yes, it was a wide variety. Covered just about anything and everything. Saw some pretty unique stuff too come through, but I'd say mostly on the surgical side.
Right.
And then just to add, a couple cents on it in that last discussion, I started putting more pieces together once I had more conversations with trainers and PTs and strength coaches, and kind of once I had more in-depth conversations and collaboration with them, the pitching stuff made way more sense. And I would also encourage anyone to reach out to any professional in that field or at your school and use them as a resource too. But
did you find a shift change in the player or in the coaching staff that you were dealing with before and after that player was injured? So did you see maybe, man, we're not touching this guy, he's going to be okay, it was just a freak blowout, or, was there a common theme with guys hey, we need to fix this, we need to address this, and you guys dove a little bit deeper?
I don't think it was too much on programming so much as it was what were they doing before? Were they really doing their movement prep or their stretch or their pre-throw as best as they could? Was it a routine kind of thing? Was it just age, use, wear and tear? I mean, there's a variety of different things that would come up, but I think what they did coming out was have a more structured routine. What they needed to click before they picked up a baseball became way more prevalent than, when they first came to rehab, or maybe before the season started in spring training, or, and saw it on the college side too. If they're running from class to the locker room to the field, they miss team stretch, they're missing out on a lot of things. Mm-hmm. Making sure that you're send them to the bullpen or send them somewhere further away where they can get that special time in to make sure that they're activated correctly to perform at that practice or in that game. And that's kind of getting back to the basics of it, but
Yeah.
the communication part is you can't communicate enough when it comes to that stuff. But I think back to the original question, I think leaving rehab, they just formed better routines and what they actually needed to click, whether they were a younger guy coming off TJ or an older guy coming off just a nagging injury that we had to build strength-wise back up to get him back to on the field.
And I think that speaks to a bigger issue that we have as coaches where you get guys that are relatively healthy and maybe they're cruising and they're player of the week and, their S doesn't stink. And then their habits get lazy. So their body, like you said, John, maybe he's not taking his high intent throwing as seriously and he's getting lazy in his prep work. So the only time he's trying to execute 100% efficient delivery that is his delivery is on game day. And I think that can put you in a really bad spot as well. So understanding, when Pete, I think we had a couple of people ask for you to put that graph back up of the schedule. And this is a question I want to ask all of you guys. Just go one at a time. And Pete, you can start it off. Do you, how do you evaluate heavy days when it's not a bullpen, right? So obviously a bullpen, you can just throw a radar gun up there. You can have a Rapsodo or a TrackMan, and you can tell that the guy that is 90 in the game is 90 in the bullpen, or a percentage. But in terms of, a long toss day or a day where they're just, maybe it's an off-season training day and they're doing a high compression day or a pull-down day. What are the things that you've done or you've felt have been successful in terms of measuring that intensity, and how do you kind of compare that to the player's assessment of that effort, perceived effort versus actual effort?
Yeah, so in an off season, if you were taking away the mound stuff, I'll cover that first. I mean, you could just deem any heavy day as, in that week structure, you want those couple days to be the heaviest long toss, the heaviest amount of plyos. Look at it from a volume standpoint. And that'd be a really good baseline to start. And, in terms of effort, RPE percentage, you can get a baseline from a radar gun, a pocket radar. I've seen coaches, or I've even done it myself, hold a pocket radar up just to get a couple quick ticks and then walk away so that guy knows what range he's in. Could be a really quick on-field resource to have. But in terms of, mapping out a heavy workload without bullpens, engaging that, just deem those days. Maybe it's the only days you can get on the field, so we're going to stretch it out, or we can get on the turf football field and do something if we're in a cold weather state. You can still map out medium, heavy, light. You're just going to put more emphasis, or more volume would probably be the best term, in certain areas. So heavier plyos, make it a 90 or 100% effort plyo day. Maybe medium, you kick it back to 70%, something along those lines, and kind of pick and choose. And then I'll also cop out and just say, ask your pitchers, ask how they're feeling on, the day before. Do they feel like they got enough out of it? Was it, do we need to push on the gas a little bit more, pump the brakes? Did they feel ready for the heavy day? Were they too sore where you had to actually cancel the heavy day, push it back, realign the week schedule? So over communicate, see what works, ask all your pitchers, get a poll kind of thing going, get a pulse of your pitching staff and see what's working for everybody. And you just ask one guy or your best guy. It's not always going to work for your 14th or 15th guy as well.
Connor, kind of same thing. Like, is there anything that you've used that's been kind of unique or effective, outside of just like, hey, we got a radar gun?
In regards to what specifically, though?
In regards to, are you putting guys on a challenge to go 5 feet further than they did the last week, or on long toss? Alan, I think Alan's on this call, and the godfather of long toss, and certainly a master of the mental game. You can scream feed it at a kid all day long, but how do you really know what you're getting out of them? Is that, Max, effort, so how, in terms of measuring a heavy, high intensity day without, a bullpen session where you're comparing it to on mound game stuff.
Yeah, I think what Peter was talking about is spot on. If you can get that feedback, that's outstanding. And that way it's not, you're asking, hey, what effort level is that at? Where are we at? Yeah. For us at our level, it's so individualized. It's so different for each guy. For us, it's a lot of, when are you throwing your bullpen? Are you a day 2 guy? Are you a day 3 guy? A lot of them have routines. I won't name names, but I've had big league arms throw bullpens and they don't break 72, right? And I have a certain individual that throws a bullpen and he can't get below 96, right? So it's just different for every guy. I've had guys who in bullpens can only push it to 86, but then in games they're 95, 96, right? They just need that little extra bump of adrenaline. So for us at our level, I think we all kind of have a sense of a feel. There are certain individuals that really want that feedback of a radar gun, whether they're doing plyo ball work, long toss of any degree, or even it's just checking the radar gun on portable TrackMan or the Rapsodo machine, whichever you have, even some of the other tech balls out there. But for us, it's a little different on that front, but I love what I'm hearing for some of the younger guys to utilize.
There's an end game to this. So Jono, go ahead, answer.
The main thing that I want to hit on is I hope that it doesn't get skipped over the beauty of the simplicity of light, medium, heavy. I'm not being sarcastic, Pete. I swear to God. You ask a player, hey, we're gonna create 3 different days: light, medium, and heavy. It's pretty simple, right? As opposed to an Obulus C day, where what are we doing? Like hybrid 25D today, like
the lunar module star date.
Yeah, let's be. I think it's so easy for players to understand, and it's also our job, like what we're talking about, like feedback. I mean, it's our job to provide feedback as best as we can. I think the radar gun's really good for that in that sense. That was the biggest thing that was sitting me as I'm watching. This is something pro guys use. Professional players use outlines like this. It doesn't always need to be rocket surgery.
No, and the reason why I asked that question to all 3 of you, because I kind of was hoping that you would all say very similar things. And my point to that is, velocity is important. And it's not just important on game day. It's important when you're training. It's important when you are evaluating. Hey, man, you're on a heavy day. Today is a get after day. Today is a medium day. That means we want you at 75%. And then Connor, like you said, you have that guy who says, Coach, I'm throwing 75%. Well, you're throwing 78 miles an hour. You don't throw 102, big fella. So having that connection between the perceived effort can only mean anything if you have an actual number.
Yeah.
So, yes, high velocity plays, and that we can all agree with that. Training velocity, a lot of people disagree with, but velocity matters, and it doesn't just it can't be in a vacuum of the context of in-game performance and pull downs that are on Twitter. There's an actual really reasonable use for a velocity, measurement in practice, in training. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there to kind of tell guys that there's 3 guys in pro ball right now that are all telling you that, well, really the only way to kind of tell how hard you're throwing is with the radar gun. So you kind of have to use that tool. Pete, can you unshare?
Yeah.
And then I'll share something. So this is something that we've kind of put together.
Oh, he beat you, Pete. He's all color coded, man.
Well, I was an art major for half of my college time, so
I love it.
I'm really anal retentive about formatting. And our volunteer Mike Shermanico is a whiz with analytics, and he has put me on warp speed. But what I do is I give him the task, and then he gives it back to me, and I format it. So
that is awesome.
He's been awesome. He's been another lefty in the mix. So
good pickoff move.
He's just too cheese.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah. Us guys, walk them, pick them off. That's what we do.
But again, this was something that I felt was critically important for our guys so that we could give them a better idea of, hey, if you're a middle reliever and you threw 3 to 4 innings on Friday, this is going to be your schedule, and this is what you need to be mentally prepared for. And light, medium, game day. Like, I don't know where I got that from. I think I might have gotten it once again from Alan Jaeger. And it's pretty basic. The issue is with freshmen that come in, and I'm sure when guys are coming into your systems, you have to define it. You have to define it, and you have to be clear. There's got to be clarity of what a light day is. Number of throws, distance, kind of spectrums. Long tosses, obviously, do what you can do. But I just thought that was interesting how Pete used light, medium, heavy, and that's basically what these are. When we're in training mode, this yellow day is just a heavy day. It's just a bullpen or a heavy day. So
I want no part of gorillas.
No, it's not that bad. It's just some stuff. Couple other just questions that'll kind of shoot around. Pete, when we're talking about a throwing schedule like that, is it much different in spring training versus in season? Is there a huge variance? Is there no variance? Obviously there's a lot of individuality with regard to reliever and starter, but is a starter doing something different in spring training than he is in the season?
I think, to be pretty generic, it's the same structure. There's going to be we'll go off, track according to guy, maybe how they reported, where they're at, built up wise prior to reporting. I kind of chose, when you shot me that question earlier, how did I handle individuals in the fall in college or fall ball in high school, and translate it to 7-day program, and I think it translates really well. You're going to substitute some things out according to the time of the year, what your goal is. Do you have games coming up? But in terms of spring training and in season, we're building that foundation just like we would in college and the fall, and getting them on that 3-day cycle. It's a little bit different with the pro side, with whether you're 5-man rotation, 6-man rotation. Off days coming up, so in season is going to look a little bit different compared to spring training, but we're getting them built into that 3-day, 4-day cycle. Just see how they came in reporting and deviate off that if we need to, but very similar.
Good, yeah, that's kind of what I was figuring. So another superstar in the field. I got a question from Jerry Weinstein. Have you guys looked into at all the recoil for deceleration in terms of after the throw? Have you guys approached that with any, have you read into it? Is there anything that's you've had guys success with it? Have you dabbled with it at all?
Take it away, Connor.
I will say this. I would say 5-10 years ago, it was a big no-no, right?
Right.
I think was Eugene the one that really started the conversation of maybe this might not be as bad.
He's the one that I first sort of started hearing about.
Published it, right? Yeah, it was an awesome book. Definitely check it out. What I would say on it is, it's kind of like with any of this stuff. If it's working for a guy, do it. If it's not working for a guy, maybe we need to adjust. But if by some reason this thing is helpful, if he feels sexier in his delivery, like I think that is often overlooked a lot. If they don't feel cool in their throw, cool in their delivery, not a lot of good can come from it. So maybe it is that little extra flair on it that gets them to load the hips properly or whatever it may be, right? So if it's working, great. If it's not, then maybe it's time to adjust. That would be kind of my take.
Right. And I think the big thing too is I know you guys are getting a little bit more polished products than I am, than high school guys. for me, the one thing that I started noticing just in the time that I've been using it is if you're having a kid who's having a hard time where he's continuously just rolling off the mound, right? He's over rotating. That kind of movement can really get the trunk to stop, where you can get that whip and you can actually get a more inline delivery, because the whole body has to stop and then they have to kind of recoil the arm. So that's something that, again, is another, we can do that in the after hours. And I'm getting blown up on my text messages from all the ABCA guys. We gotta wrap up, guys. This has been awesome. We're going to head into the after hours room. That's going to be on the main page on the schedule. There should be another link. So if you want to dial into that, go to the schedule and then go to the post meeting. And then that's where you'll see you can sign in for a slot and go from there. So, guys, this has been great. More info coming. So we'll see you in the after hours.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.